Welcome to GameRomp Easy Mode, a chill podcast about video games and other stuff that's vaguely video game related.
Yeah.
We're your hosts, Deanna and
David.
Today we're going to talk about video game systems.
Yeah.
Specifically handheld stuff.
Yeah, because the Switch 2 was revealed officially, so it'd be fun to talk about, the handhelds we've had in the past and what we would look forward to or want in a new handheld. Maybe a wish list for the Switch 2. Basically, we're going to talk about stuff from our past. So why don't we start with something really, really old?
Do you mean like basically the first handheld ever that I'm aware of? Is it the first handheld?
No. If it's what I think you're talking about.
Okay, do you know what the first handheld was then?
I think like Game & Watch type games were pretty much...
Oh, do those count? I was thinking like things that actually had cartridges.
No, because I want to talk about one of the first things I got was a Tiger handheld.
Okay, fine.
I don't know if old people like me will remember Tiger handhelds.
Well, I mean, these were the ones that had the little screen where you could kind of already see what the game was about.
It's an LCD screen, so like they basically... There wasn't a lot of movement in it. The images were already drawn in, and they would just be like highlighted as you play.
Yeah, okay, so I guess I'm old enough to know what those are.
Well, yeah, hopefully. But this was way back. I'm pretty sure I had this before the Game Boy, but maybe not. This was back when I think Sonic 2 had just come out. So the Game Boy probably was already out, I guess, but... I remember this one is memorable to me because I had the Sonic the Hedgehog 2 Tiger handheld. And I got that because I really wanted to play Sonic 2 because, the commercials would be on and it's like, oh, this looks so cool. But I already had a Nintendo system and there's no way in hell that my parents were going to buy me a Genesis as well. So this was like the next best thing. It's like, well, at least I can play Sonic 2 on this thing. And it's just very simple. Like,
yeah, I can imagine.
For those that don't know what those old handhelds were like, and even like the Game & Watch was the same way, the images were drawn in. So like you'd always have the image of Sonic in the center of the screen, and he'd have like two states for his feet, and they would flicker on and off. And the little monkey robot thing in the corner is always going to be in that exact same spot.
Yeah, like they don't actually move.
No. Like, for example, there's one point where like if you hold left on the D-pad, Sonic would go to the left of the screen like he's charging up, and the middle Sonic would disappear and the left Sonic would turn on. But once you let go of that button, it's back to the middle Sonic, and like you said, you can kind of see them all especially if you held it up to the light just right. You can see like all the art in it. But I mean, as a kid, that was my way of playing Sonic 2, and I was like so impressed, like, oh, there's Tails too following him, and it was not amazing, but it was what we had, or what I had.
I feel like these Tiger handhelds, or whatever you want to count them as, they're only like maybe one step up from, do you know those little kid like car racing things where it's like, oh, the kid was driving with the steering wheel,
yeah,
and it would move the car, but the car is like literally on a popsicle stick or something.
Yeah, and then like the background was just like this looping image.
Yeah. It's just one step from that, and it's like, oh, geez. But that's what we had back in the day.
Yeah, basically. Eventually, I did get the old Game Boy Brick, the classic white one, I guess, gray. It eventually turns yellow.
Gray, yeah. I had the brick, but it was brick colored. It was red.
I got the brick before there was even colors.
Oh, jeez.
So...
super old school.
Yeah, and it came with like Tetris, of course, but then some of the first games I had were like Super Mario Land 1 and...
Didn't have that.
The original Kirby.
The Kirby Dream Land?
Yeah.
Okay, I did have that one. Mega
Man 2 was one of the first ones I had too.
Is that what got you started in Mega Man?
No, I actually started Mega Man on the NES, but...
Oh, yeah.
I like the Game Boy ones too. Mega Man 2 for the Game Boy has some issues, and it's not really regarded very well these days, but...
Is it because of screen size? Because I'm assuming most of the issues are that.
Basically, okay, so Mega Man on the Game Boy, they're kind of remixed versions of the Mega Man games on the NES. For example, the first Mega Man on Game Boy had 4 bosses for Mega Man 1 and 4 bosses for Mega Man 2. Mega Man 2 had 4 bosses for Mega Man 2, 4 bosses for Mega Man 3.
Wait, are there 2 Mega Man 2s?
There's Mega Man 2 on the NES and Mega Man 2 on the Game Boy.
Okay.
So yeah, the Game Boy ones were kind of remixes. For most of the Game Boy Mega Man games, they're pretty I don't want to say uncreative, but like if you go to play Cutman Stage, it feels like Cutman Stage and you'll get Cutman music. If you played Mega Man 3 and you like, I don't know, went to Dive Man Stage, it feels like Dive Man Stage. But Mega Man 2 was developed by somebody else and they kind of went wild with it. Not only did the stages feel weirdly different, but also they gave all the robots brand new music.
Is that bad?
In my opinion, it was good, but it was done in a not great way. From what I've understood, like looking back on it and seeing some history recently, like whoever programmed the music for Mega Man 2 on the Game Boy, I think the composer must have like given them the music and then they programmed it into the game, but they kind of screwed up and the pitch is all wrong.
Uh-oh.
So it's kind of like, it can be kind of ear piercing.
Is that not just an issue with the Game Boy itself? Because
No.
I feel like I've wanted to use more Game Boy or even NES music on the at the end of the podcast, but many of them have felt like the pitch is too high and it would be very screechy.
Like, if anyone's curious, you can look up, like, Airman's theme from the Game Boy Mega Man 2. And then look up the pitch-corrected version. And you'll see, like, oh, that actually sounds like Mega Man music. So clearly somebody just put it into the game and they kind of screwed up. But, I mean, this is back in the day. You can't just, download a patch. It's just stuck.
Yeah. What you bought is what you got.
But still, it was really cool that they actually decided to make new music. Whereas, like, all the other Game Boy games, they're like, well, Skullman already has his song. We'll just use that song. And, like, they would try to remix the NES songs into Game Boy songs. And it's fine. But I really like that Mega Man 2 actually, like, they're like, no, we're just going to make new songs for them, too. Also, a funny thing about Mega Man 2 for the Game Boy, I think it's like the only time Mega Man just straight up kills Dr. Wily.
Oh, shit. Does that mean this whole game is non-canon? Because, I mean, it can't continue if he legitimately killed Dr. Wily in this game.
I mean, maybe there's just some plausible deniability, but in most Mega Man games, when like you get to Dr. Wily, he does this whole thing where he's like, gets on his knees and he's like begging, right?
Yeah.
And then the game kind of ends. Sometimes he'll run away and escape. In this game, after you beat him, he's just trying to escape. So he gets into his spaceship because the final stage takes place in space. And then you see Mega Man, he jumps into Rush and like he's chasing Mega Man in outer space, shoots him, his ship goes flying and crashes into the planet and explodes.
Oh, shit.
And it's like, you could pretend Wily survived that, but that looks like Mega Man just straight up shot and killed him.
Mega Man was just completely done with his shit.
Anyway, I love that game. It has its issues. There's one more little weird kink I'll tell you about this one. In most Mega Man games, if you collect a health power-up or a weapon refill, especially a big one, it's noticeable when it's a big one, everything on the screen freezes while the energy recharges and you get that little noise, right?
Yeah.
Mega Man 2 for the Game Boy is the only one where that doesn't happen. The game doesn't freeze when you collect health power-ups. And I guess they did that because it's like, well, that kind of makes sense, but it also doesn't feel like Mega Man when that happens.
Interesting.
It's a little thing, but Mega Man nerds will notice it.
Do you think that happened in the originals due to, like, system limitations?
I don't know, actually.
Because if that was the case, you would think the Game Boy would have vaguely similar limitations.
I don't know the reasons for it. It's just that it happened. But enough about my Game Boy experiences. How about you? What's some of your early favorite Game Boy games?
Well, I started with the original.
Yeah.
And it was a brick. And it was colored brick. So I had the red one. I was young enough that I didn't know that there was the original gray. And I didn't know when the colors started coming out. Because there was other colors, I think, right?
Yeah, at some point they released a bunch of colors.
So I don't know how much later that was.
And then later on they had like the Game Boy Pocket, which also came in a bunch of colors.
Yeah, I skipped over Game Boy Color or Game Boy Pocket, if you will. So my big thing about the original brick was that It was actually a present from my dad. And that doesn't sound like a big thing, but my dad was not around. So actually getting a present from him was surprising, and the fact that it was a Game Boy was super surprising.
A good gift, honestly.
Yeah. And another thing that came with it, I don't know if this came with the Game Boy originally or if it was like an additional thing he bought for it, was this like clear plastic case. And it would hold the Game Boy in there on one side, and the other side it would have slots. Well, maybe not slots. It would have compartments for the video game cartridges. I don't remember how many cartridges it could hold total. I believe, I don't know if I had Tetris with it. I know Tetris was like one of the original games, but I don't think I had it, or if I did, I wasn't one of the games that I really liked. I do remember having Kirby Dream Land.
Great one.
I had Donkey Kong. I don't know if it counts as the original or like a...
Donkey Kong was pretty late, because that came out when the Super Game Boy came out. I don't remember if that was before or after the Pocket, but yeah, that was...
I believe Donkey Kong was included when he sent it to me. I think it was 3 games, and then Mario Picross. Those are the ones that I do remember having, and those might have been the original 3 that he gave me. And I think it was around like 6 years old or so, give or take. Because I remember where I was living at the time.
Yeah, that tracks.
I guess that was basically the... I don't want to say the exact beginning of my gaming adventure as a child, because I think technically I had like a Super Nintendo before then. But I was so young that I didn't really comprehend how gaming consoles worked.
Yeah.
And it was constantly, quote unquote, breaking. So we always took it to the repair shop to get it fixed, but it was probably also like, oh, you just have to blow into the cartridge. But I had no connection to many other people that played games, so I just didn't know how it worked. It was...
That's rough.
Kind of complicated,
Jeez,
I guess. And obviously
money that
Mom...
must have been wasted.
Yeah, and Mom didn't understand, so whatever. So I'd say that having the original Game Boy was what really started me.
Yeah, and I think I haven't played much Picross, but definitely Kirby was amazing. And
yeah.
Donkey Kong is also amazing. For those that don't know, Donkey Kong on the Game Boy was made to showcase the Super Game Boy, which was a Super Nintendo.
Really?
Yeah. It was a Super Nintendo Game Boy adapter. You could play your Game Boy games on the TV.
Needless to say, I didn't have that.
Yeah. I mean, the Game Boy would play it as well. It would just be black and white or monochrome. But if you played it on the Super Game Boy, it would be in color, and it had a cool little background.
Fancy.
But the really interesting thing about Donkey Kong is you're playing as Mario.
Yeah.
But he has very unique movement in this game. And it's kind of like a precursor to Mario 64 in a way.
Oh, because of the backflip.
Yeah, because he has a lot of those same exact moves. Like in Mario 64, like if you hold crouch and then jump, you do like a backflip. If you run and then turn and then jump, you do like a side jump. Those existed in Donkey Kong. So,
actually, now that you say it, I realize it, but I feel like unless we have talked about this before, and I just forgot because that's what I do.
Maybe.
I actually never thought of that before.
Yeah.
That is really, really interesting because I remember those movements, in the Donkey Kong game, and I can remember or see it in my mind for Mario 64, but I never connected them.
Yeah, and it's really cool the way they introduce it, because like you think it's just Donkey Kong, like the original Donkey Kong, where you start in that little like zigzaggy tower, you have to go get Donkey Kong, right? But you have all those moves from the very beginning. The game just doesn't tell you. I mean, maybe if you read the instruction manual, you'll figure it out. But a lot of kids don't do that. But technically, yeah, you could be like backflipping all the way up to Donkey Kong in like an instant. It's so game breaking in the beginning of the game because you always have access to it, but they don't teach you it. So if you do use it, it's a really fun way to get around the stages easily. But they do slowly introduce it as you play. So there are points in the game where like you get a little cutscene where Mario is chasing Donkey Kong, right? And sometimes Donkey Kong will throw like traps. And one of the things he'll do is like, oh, he's throwing these barrels. So what does Mario do? He does his little backflip and he's like does a headstand. And when he's on a headstand mode, if the barrel hits his
feet,
Yeah, they just bounce off. So it's
Yeah.
like teaching you. These are things you can do now. Figure it out.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. There's like the cutscenes, but they happen before each level, I think.
Before each, I think it's after each boss fight or before each major stage, because there's like, you start on the typical Donkey Kong like zigzaggy tower, and then it goes into like a New York City kind of place, or then it's like a jungle. And
Yeah, there's like 4 levels to each major stage.
yeah, there's like different like biomes. I think there's like a ship and an airplane, a bunch of them. It's really cool.
Yeah, as a kid, I always got stuck on the ship because somehow I never realized that I didn't have to jump on the ship like I thought I had to. And I didn't beat that until I was an adult later on,
So yeah, if you guys want, I don't want to say underappreciated or lesser known, but if you want a Mario game you haven't played, and you haven't played Donkey Kong on the Game Boy, it's highly recommended. It's really fun. It's a Mario platforming game. It just happens to star Donkey Kong.
And was there a Donkey Kong game that was originally on the NES? Like, I feel that there was, or maybe it was arcade, where it was just the 4 levels. It didn't actually go further than that.
There was an NES port. There was also an Atari port.
Oh.
The first time I played Donkey Kong was on Atari, actually. It was pretty ugly, but, you know, a lot of Atari games are pretty ugly.
I mean, that's basically what games started as. They didn't have the best graphics.
But yeah, there was also an NES port, and then the NES also got a bunch of sequels, like Donkey Kong 2, where Mario is the bad guy, and you control Donkey Kong Jr., trying to save his dad from you're saving his dad Donkey Kong from Mario, who's got him in like a cage.
Mario was a sicko.
Anyway, how about Kirby? Kirby was amazing too.
Yeah, Kirby was fun. And I got through the original game relatively easy, even as a kid. And then this was, I guess some games still do this, but when you beat the original run through, if you will, it would unlock like Game Plus.
Yeah, like a hard mode.
Yeah. And I remember unlocking that, but then somehow I could never get past like the first couple of stages in hard mode.
It's hard. You get less life, but also the enemies change. And
oh yeah,
they go from like looking cute and silly, as you know Kirby enemies do, to like kind
more
of
horrifying.
Yeah.
Horrifying.
Yeah. It's really interesting. There's one thing about the original Kirby 2 that is fun to me, is that since you didn't have the power-up system where you'd swallow like What'll Do and get his like beam ability, they would have certain power-ups around the world. Like, okay, the super power lollipop thing that makes you invincible, that's in all the Kirby games. But back then there was also Curry. You would get Curry and Kirby would get all heated up and shoot fire. Or there was one that, like, I forget what it's called, but you would get it and then Kirby would be like an infinite air puff mode where he could fly and then just shoot like his air puffs, but like all the way across the screen and just repeatedly.
Yeah, because in the original Dreamland, you only get that when you go against the ship boss,
Really?
right?
I thought there was other points where you get that too, but you do get that versus a boss, yeah.
Because in this game, he doesn't get any powers. He just flies.
Just those, yeah. Also, one of the enemies, or one of the big bosses in the game is Lo and La La La, which they have their own like series of games on the NES. So that's kind of like a fun.
Yeah, I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah, me neither. But eventually I played those games too. An interesting thing about this version of Kirby is technically it exists as a remake on I think it's the DS version of Kirby Superstar. Was it DS or 3DS? I'm pretty sure it's DS. One of those DS systems has Kirby Superstar. If you get that on the DS and you beat all the original Kirby Superstar quote unquote games, you'll unlock this new remake of the original Kirby game. And unlike, okay, sorry, I'm going back and forth, but I think most people realize when you play Kirby Superstar, the first quote-unquote game you play is basically kind of a remake of the original Kirby game, where you start in Green Greens, then you go to the castle, then you go to the water level, then you fight DDD at the end. But it's a very condensed version of that game, and it also skips out on the airship battle.
Aw.
But on the DS version of Kirby Superstar, once you finish all the other games, you unlock like this, I forget what they call it, but it's basically the original the original Kirby game, but in hard mode. So all the enemies have the weird, like, scary sprites.
Oh, jeez.
And it's, you know, it's pretty hard. And it also brings back, like, the full stages. They're not condensed anymore. You get to see the airship makes a comeback as well.
Yay.
It's really cool. So that's another great way to experience that version of Kirby if, you know, you don't have the original Game Boy game.
You know, not that it's just a random thought, but when you go through Dreamland, the first boss is the tree and it has a face. And I don't know if it's the second one. I don't know if I'm going in order. Then you go against the cloud and it has the eyeball.
That one's later, but yeah, Krakow.
Then you eventually go after DDD and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
But the blimp is literally just a blimp, isn't it?
In the original, I think so, yeah. In the remake for the Kirby Superstar, they give him, like, kind of a face, but it's kind of like a painted-on face like you would see in old World War II fighter planes.
Yeah. So it's weird that, like, all the other bosses are characters, and then this one's just a blimp for some reason.
Oh,
like,
there's somebody driving the blimp, I guess.
You could say that, but you never see them, so it's just, I don't know, it's weird. And then going back to my games, just the Mario Picross, which is not... It wasn't super exciting.
Yeah.
It's just whatever.
It's a puzzle game.
And then there was games that I did eventually go back to, like, I guess, at the time, Toys R Us. Back when you could see the label of the game and you'd have to pick out the little yellow paper and bring it up to the counter and then get the game. That was such a weird system, and, like, I don't know how long that lasted.
I think they kept that for a while, because, like, it makes sense for a big store like Toys R Us, where they don't have employees just guarding a case like you would at, like, EB or GameStop. But, yeah, I remember that. And also in those aisles where all the games were lined up, like, they'd usually have consoles you could play.
So I think from there, those were the 3 games I started with. And then I would go and, you know... Maybe once in a while, Mom could afford to get me a new game. So I don't remember in, like, a specific order which games I got when, but I believe I got the Kirby brick game, Kirby Block. Do you remember what it was called? Because I had you play it once.
Yeah, I don't remember what it's called, but it's basically like Breakout, but with Kirby.
Yeah, and that was interesting. And that was the first game that I played of Kirby that had... Kirby gaining powers, yeah. Which was interesting because it was like, oh, I know these characters, but in the game I played previously, nothing happened. And then suddenly, oh, I can become a rock and, like, go through all the bricks or something.
I'm guessing you never played Kirby Dream Land 2?
No.
Okay, that one is very interesting too. That's, I think, one of the first one that kind of goes into the cosmic horror stuff.
Yeah,
I mean,
I never experienced cosmic horror in Kirby until, like, way later.
Kirby's Adventure also kind of had that a little bit on the NES with the Nightmare guy, but in Kirby's Dream Land 2, you actually see, like, DDD possessed by it, and it's really creepy.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
I wonder if that would have freaked me out as a kid.
It was surprising to me. Like, I can tell this is DDD, and it's got the classic DDD music, but
something is terribly wrong.
Clearly that he's sleeping the whole time, and he's acting weird. And then when you beat the game, it's like, it's kind of sad feeling. Everyone's in the rain, just walking slowly, and it says "end?" ? And so, like, yeah, you have to figure out how to properly, you know, quote unquote, save DDD and see what the real boss is. But yeah, it was cool.
And I think it was on the original Game Boy where the Pokemon came out, right?
Yep.
Man, that's so crazy.
Because,
like, I don't remember if I got the game first or saw the anime. Which one?
I probably saw the... actually, I don't know. I think I played Blue and Red on a ROM, and then, like, Yellow was coming out, and I was getting into the anime, and I'm like, oh, well, Yellow has the anime character, so of course I'm going to get Yellow, plus that has all the starters. And that's when I bought my first Pokemon game. I bought Pokemon Yellow when I was in 9th grade, which I already told the story.
I guess I must have... Yeah, I think it was before the anime. And I'm trying to think, like, oh, how did I get exposed to Pokemon Red or Blue before I ever watched the anime? And now I'm thinking back, and I believe one of the kids, I don't remember who, had given me, or tried to give me, like, the cartridge, quote unquote, the cartridge of one of the Pokemon games. But it was actually just like the motherboard.
What the?
Yeah, it didn't have the cartridge encasement around it. It was really weird.
Huh.
And I couldn't get it to work because I was a kid, or it was really just legitimately goofed up. And then I remember first playing the game at a bowling alley, and I feel like I went over this once before.
Yeah, the saving thing.
Yeah. Figuring out how to save a game for the first time in my life. And then there was also like, oh, the kid had told me to go into the store and I could click on the items to buy items in the store, but that didn't work. And I didn't think as a kid to like, oh, maybe I should just talk to the person. I don't know. It was weird. I don't remember what other games I had on the original brick. Otherwise, oh, there was also the thing about the crushed cartridge. So my original Donkey Kong game, and this was like in 98, I believe, because in 97 I was back there. So it was either 98 or 99. The Game Boy Color might have already come out now, but somehow I still had the original Donkey Kong cartridge. And one day I remember stepping out of my mom's car and seeing the cartridge on the ground. And I picked it up and it was like completely not smashed in the sense of having like cracks in the cartridge, but it had clearly been under the tire because there was like
Scruffed up.
Yeah, it was scruffed up, but there was also like maybe originally like pebbles embedded in the plastic. That's how bad it was. But this was the old day of cartridges where the cartridge encompassed the entire, I guess, motherboard you would call it, and also the contacts. So I could actually still put it inside of my Game Boy or Game Boy Color, whichever I had at the time, and it literally still played.
Yeah, I mean, those things were created in a really smart way where the plastic, it was like a buffer.
Yeah.
Protection to it. So, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and I had to look it up later because I said, oh, you couldn't do that with, like, the cartridges these days. Because, like, I guess they still count as a cartridge, but they're created in a way where the contacts are completely exposed.
Yeah.
And I looked it up, and yes, the Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Pocket, I don't know if that had special cartridges or not.
No.
And the Game Boy Advanced, all those cartridges were fully encased.
Yeah.
Then once the DS came out, the contacts on the cartridges have all been exposed to the air, I guess. And if that had happened, they would have been absolutely destroyed.
Yeah, because then they would be scratched up against the rocks and stuff, I guess.
So it's just interesting that, like, yeah, I had a game cartridge. It was, like, pebbles embedded. I think I probably got most, if not all of them, eventually out. But it was just, like, the plastic was completely molded into the scraping.
Game Gear was like that, too. I'm guessing you never played Game Gear.
Nope. I only had Nintendo.
Okay, I'll go into it just briefly. But, again, this was when I was a Nintendo kid, I guess. But I still really wanted to play Sonic games. So we would rent the Genesis, so, you know, we'd go to the store and you'd pay like, I think $20 to rent the Genesis for the weekend. They give you to it in like a big briefcase. You take it home. Just, you know, I would play Sonic. And it was fine and dandy. I got to play through Sonic 1, 2, and 3 all just by renting the whole console. Eventually I was like, I want Sonic to just own. So I was able to at least beg my parents to get me a Game Gear. I forget if I'm pretty sure they bought me a Game Gear or if I just inherited it from my cousin. Either way, eventually my first Sonic game that I ever owned was Sonic 2 on the Game Gear. And it was a little disappointing because unlike Sonic 2 for the Genesis, Tails didn't follow you.
No.
It was more like, oh, Tails exists, but he got kidnapped, so you gotta go save him. And like you had to like find the Chaos Emeralds out in the world, and if you got all the Chaos Emeralds, you could go to the true final stage where Robotnik has Tails.
Tails is the princess.
But if you don't get all the Chaos Emeralds, and they can be a pain in the ass to find, when you beat Metal Sonic at the end of the game, you just get the credits. So it rolls credits, you see Sonic, you know, walking through the world, and it's all like nighttime, and you get to the end, and Sonic just kind of looks up into the sky, and you see like Tails in the sky as like in the stars or something. It's like,
aww.
It's like either telling you forgot to save Tails, or I don't know, he's fucking dead.
But, God, he got murdered. Yeah.
One of the funny things, and I'm just gonna tell a embarrassing story from childhood.
Oh boy.
When I don't know how old I was, but one of the memories I have that I look back on and just like, I wish I could strangle my little kid self.
Oh.
Is We were at GameStop or EB. I forget which one. It might have been like Software, etc. Whatever the case. I wanted to get Sonic 1 for the Game Gear because I already had Sonic 2, but it's like, oh, I want Sonic 1 because it has Green Hill Zone, whereas Green Hill Zone in Sonic 2 was awful. And anyone who's played Sonic 2 on the Game Gear knows why Green Hill is awful, because normally Green Hill is like the starter zone, but in this it was like stage 4 and it was kind of hard. Weird. And there was a lot of blind jumps where you're just going fast, jumping on springs, and hoping you have just the right amount of momentum where you don't go too far or go too little to land in spikes. It was really bad. Anyway, Sonic 1 starts in Green Hill, and then you have like Bridge Zone, and then like this cool Waterfall Forest Zone, and then finally Scrap Brain Zone, or whatever it's called. It just felt really good, and I really wanted it. Eventually I got it, but I remember going to the store with my mom and just having a little kid fit, crying, being like, I want it, crying, and like being a huge pain in the ass to my mom.
Oh.
And it's one of those things where it's like, you can never fully express your gratitude to your parents' patience for dealing with you as a shitty little kid. And it's like, I wish I could just forget those memories. So thanks, Mom. I love you, and I'm sorry.
Poor you. I have one of those, but it has nothing to do with video games, so I think I'll skip it.
Yeah. Anyway, let's move on to the Game Boy Advance. That's like the next big handheld. Really.
Excuse you, we have Game Boy Color.
Oh, well.
Because there was Game Boy Pocket, I believe, before Game Boy Color.
Yeah.
But I didn't bother to... I didn't bother to try and get it because it's like, oh, it's just the same thing.
Just smaller, yeah.
But I did want the Game Boy Color because, well, that came with color, and that was something new. So, of course, you want something that's new.
I don't even remember if I had a Game Boy Color back then.
But the really big thing for me with the Game Boy Color is it had atomic purple, and that was the best color ever.
Is that the one that's kind of see-through?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was amazing. And this was after I had the Nintendo 64, which the one that I got had the second controller, which was atomic purple.
Yeah.
And that was my controller. Now, granted, I didn't really have friends to share it with either, but the atomic purple is just my favorite thing ever. Another cool thing at the time, as a kid at least, was that you could put in, I believe, some of the older Game Boy cartridges, and it would try to give it color, I think, to some degree. It wasn't very good. It wasn't like full color or anything, obviously. Yeah. But I feel like it changed it around a little bit. I don't know how they did that.
It's basically, the original Game Boy games had like 4 shades.
Okay.
So when you play it on Game Boy Color or Super Game Boy, those 4 shades can be 4 different colors.
Oh, okay. Well, that would explain it then. The other thing is, I also remember starting my enjoyment of Bomberman games on the Game Boy Color. So I don't know if it counts as the original, but the basic Bomberman game where he has the whip or whatever. Like, I'm pretty sure the picture on this cartridge was making him look like Indiana Jones.
Okay. Like
he was going into a shrine or something, and he had the whip, and he had the leather getup and the hat and everything. Yeah. And that was what I count as like the original Bomberman gameplay, where you were in the the top down, and then like the crisscross, and you had to plant the bomb and run away so you didn't explode and shit like that. Yeah. But the other thing I also had was the Bomberman Pocket game, which this is the one where it turned it more into a platformer. Yeah. And I don't think they've done that since. No, they've had other adventure-ish games, but not, I don't think platformer like that. I mean, 3D platformers, does that count? I mean, I guess. I never played those myself. But, yeah. And I really, really, really liked the Bomberman Pocket game setup. Because, like, I guess I did okay at the original Bomberman, but the platforming was much more fun. There was slightly less sitting around waiting for the bombs to explode and having to run off somewhere so that they didn't explode you. Yeah. I mean, you still had to deal with that, but yeah. It was unique. I mean, I played it a little bit at your behest, and it was fun. It gets frustrating because if you're like on a boss and you go into the boss with like all your stuff powered up, so you got like
you can put down 3 bombs, and they have big explosion radiuses, and they have like the timer, not the timer thing, but the other thing where you could like place it down and then push the button to explode it when you want.
Yeah.
It's like so helpful. But if you die, and you die in one hit,
fuck you, you're losing
you lose all
that.
And it's back to like, you have to put 1 bomb down, and it's very tiny explosion, and you have to time it, and like fighting those bosses with that can be a huge pain.
Yeah, you will be punished.
Yeah.
So that's fair. But those other... Okay, I guess technically Pokemon Yellow would have been on the Game Boy Color, right? Or was that original Game Boy still?
I think that's still... No, it was still original Game Boy, because I remember Crystal and what is it, Silver, Gold and Silver? I think those were Pokemon, or those are Game Boy Color games.
Okay.
But yeah.
Oh yeah, I had those too.
I never really played too much of Gold and Silver or
Crystal. I believe
Crystal.
I had Pokemon Gold.
It's definitely a gap in my Pokemon history.
My gap came after that, because I don't think I really played any of the other Pokemon games until we got together.
Well, let's keep on going, and maybe we'll get to when we got together. We'll go with... did you ever have a Game Boy Advance?
I had a Game Boy Advance for one game, and then I lost it.
Wow, okay. What game was that? Do you remember?
Dragon Ball Z.
Oh, yeah. I remember that, because when we first started dating, I think you still had that game just lying around in your room.
Yeah, because I lost the Game Boy Advance back in Rhode Island.
I don't remember when I got the Game Boy Advance, but I know I was already in high school. And I think I was like in 12th grade or something.
Which color did you have?
I think the original ones, there just weren't many options, so I might have just had the original, either silver or purple.
I had purple, because of course I did.
Because yeah, I'm talking about the original Game Boy Advance, where it was like a flat thing. It wasn't the clamshell SP.
Yeah, mine was the flat, like, I don't know what you would call that shape, almost ovalish.
Yeah, a little rectangle brickish shape. Anyway, I remember I would take it into school, and me and my friend would just play Game Boy Advance games. We'd play like Castlevania Circle of the Moon and the original Sonic on the Game Boy Advance. It was like I think that was the first time I took a video game to school and just played it in class.
Oof.
Yeah. But it was fine, because we would only do that in like art class. And my art teachers were like, pretty chill, or just weren't paying attention.
Art teachers didn't care.
But yeah, that was fun. Eventually, I remember some people would like hack their Game Boy Advance to like have a backlight in it before the SP came out. But eventually Nintendo would fix their own problem, and they released the SP that had the light in it, and yeah,
Is that the clamshell one?
Yeah, that was a lot better.
See, I think...
Well, it was better because it had light, but it was like slightly less comfortable to hold long term versus the old one.
Yeah. I think my screw up not playing video games too much was clearly after I had lost my Game Boy Advance. I had only had one game for it before I lost it. And then I don't think I had another Nintendo console, whether handheld or not. Because I had skipped out on the GameCube, and I had opted for the PS2 when we moved down to Florida. So I didn't experience the clamshell. I didn't experience the GameCube until we got together, like many years later. Or actually only a couple of years later. And like up until that point, I had been basically, if you will, a Nintendo fangirl. I hadn't played really anything else up until that time. That's all I knew. And maybe if I had actually kept the Game Boy Advance and gotten other games for it, maybe I would have gotten the GameCube at some point instead of the PS2.
Honestly, the PS2 is better anyways.
I mean, I guess, but like, I could have played all those, I don't know, Mario games, because I didn't own it, but I had played Mario 64 on my Nintendo 64. Maybe I would have kept up with Kirby games. Maybe I would have kept up with Legend of Zelda, because...
I mean, again...
I don't know.
I think you weren't missing out much. The GameCube was kind of like this is a controversial opinion maybe, but I mean, what, you're going to get Mario Sunshine and Kirby's Air Ride or whatever? You're fine skipping that generation.
I guess, but
You could have gotten Animal Crossing. That would have been interesting.
Yeah, the original, that would have been probably nice, because I remember seeing the commercials for it.
But I remember when you had the PS2, like, I was telling you, this was before we were dating. I was like, oh, you might like Katamari Damacy.
Oh, yeah, that was the one you introduced to me.
And you were like, oh, this looks kind of dumb. I don't think I would like that.
And then I tried it because someone else, I think, had recommended it.
Yeah, and then I'm like, see? I was right. But yeah, let's move on to I think the next one would be DS then.
Yes.
And this is an interesting one because, okay, correct my memory if I'm wrong, and this is probably impossible for you to do, but whatever. My memory is telling me right around when we first started dating, we both bought a DS together because it was like kind of a new thing. Or did we both had a DS and we bought like...
No, I think we both had a DS and we had both together maybe decided to get Mario Kart.
In Animal Crossing.
Yes. Okay, I remember the Animal Crossing because that was when we went to like the movies that one time and you goofed up and you shut your keys in your car.
Yeah, I accidentally locked myself out of my car.
So while we waited for
the locksmith
to show up, we ended up playing Wild World, right?
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah.
So that was, I mean, it was funny. You were so embarrassed because you're like, oh, I fucked up and we gotta wait. But I remember
that was like our second date, I think. Yeah, so I was like, oh, God, well, she's going to think I'm a fucking idiot and I'll never see her again, I guess.
But because we had Animal Crossing when we were playing together, I just remember it as a really good time of waiting 45 minutes and playing Animal Crossing together while we waited for the locksmith.
Yeah.
There was nothing wrong with it. I had a blast. So.
Yeah, luckily it wasn't a terrible day. We were in the movie theater we were at was... I forget if we might have waited in there or like just by the car. We must have made it by the car.
Yeah, because it's Florida. It was probably warm enough. It's not a big deal.
I seem to remember there being a lot of big trees, so we were just, chilling, playing the DS together. So, yeah.
So, poor you were like so scared I was going to be like, oh, there's Jack. And like, no, I'm just having fun playing Wild World.
I got lucky. But yeah, then we got like... Mario Kart 2, obviously, and that was like one of the big games that Nintendo was like, you can play online.
Oh yeah, that was great because we were long distance at the time.
Yeah.
We were like, 2-3 hours away from each other?
Yeah.
And it was also fun because I started getting actually good enough to like giving you a challenge.
Yeah.
So that was fun because I felt like, holy shit, I'm actually good at this. I'm beating a boy at this game, once in a while.
Yeah, it was fun.
So that was amazing.
Back when, because back then, sure, we could play online games. Like, we played a lot of Maple Story together.
Oh, yeah. Maple Story, Rose Online.
This was, the first, Nintendo game we could play together long distance, so that was amazing. So the DS definitely has a special place in our hearts.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, man, that was good times.
Yeah, and, the DS was really, well...
What were you going to say?
It had a lot of really good games without too many gimmicks, but, yeah, for the most part it did. I think later on some of the games,
I think I had the Nintendogs. I had bought one of those because it was like, oh, at the time, it had been years since I had a Tamagotchi. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I want a dog. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, there was a lot of the games started having...
the touch controls?
Yeah, that's what was giving me a bit of a brain fart there. I was like, because... On the GBA, there was a lot of good Castlevania games I really loved. And then when the DS came out, they're like, oh, we're going to make more Castlevania games because they're doing really well. Oh, but this has the stylus, so we have to throw in that gimmick. So,
poor you.
There was, bosses you had to fight, and then, in order to kill the boss, the screen would flash. It's like, okay, now you got to draw a star on the screen or else the boss doesn't die.
See, that was an interesting thing for me because I had gone so long without playing video games, I guess, in a handheld form since the Advance, that it didn't bother me that I had to use the stylus for things. It was like, oh, this cool new thing. So it's like,
yeah,
oh, this is awesome.
Some games did it better than others, and some games did it bad where they're like, we just got to throw in a gimmick real quick.
The biggest thing I remember was being in shock when they, I guess, if you will, announced the DS and... it was no longer the Game Boy.
Oh, yeah.
That was a huge thing at the time because I had only had Game Boy systems up until that point. and now suddenly it's just Nintendo DS.
Yeah, a lot of people were upset about that because
I think
of
I
the
was kind of
nostalgia
upset
too. But
yeah.
I guess their reasoning was, well, we don't want it to be just a boy thing. So
I mean, I guess wasn't their reasoning more that like if this fails, it's not connected to destroying the Game Boy
that too.
name?
Because originally they're like, don't worry, the Game Boy will still be its own thing. But no, not really. They never.
There was the Game Boy Micro for a little bit, but I think that was the last thing they did.
Yeah, that was just a GBA, but like very tiny.
Yeah.
I never had one of those.
I think the biggest thing about that was that it had like faceplates you could change.
Yeah.
But the screen, I feel like the screen was so small.
And like with my hands, it's just holding something that small is not going to be comfortable.
It probably would have been fine for me because, you know, I had my itty bitty hands, but that was the last thing they did with the Game Boy. And then it never had anything since.
The DS
sad.
did so good for them. Like, there was also a lot of good DS games with the drawing gimmick. Like, for example, Canvas Curse, Kirby's Canvas Curse. Did you ever play that?
I think I have some vague memories, but
that was really good. I at first I thought, oh man, it's not a traditional Kirby game, but it was fun. And I really like the music in Canvas Curse. It's so recognizably Kirby, but it's also very different. It's got like this unique like feel to it.
I guess I'll have to listen to the OST just to see.
Sure, yeah. There's some really good tracks in that game. Then there was like the more weird out there games like Brain Age. Remember that?
Oh yeah, I really got into the Brain Age at the time. I was like, oh, this isn't gonna make me smart.
It was
did not
really
make me smart.
satisfying to like draw or write on the screen, like just the way they made the sounds and everything. It's like, oh, it recognizes what I wrote.
Oh yeah, and then there was also the thing where it would ask you like questions when you first signed in, and then the other person, because you could have multiple
Accounts,
player
yeah.
profiles.
It would compare the family
Answers
in drawings too. Sometimes it would be like, draw this.
Oh yeah.
And it was like, oh, here's what Deanna drew, and here's what David drew.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Also, I got a good, interesting story for the DS.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this was around the time when, yeah, were we dating, or it must have been before we were dating, because I remember there was a hurricane in Florida, right? And the power went out for like a week or so. It was brutal, but I had my DS. And luckily work had power, so I could take my DS to work and charge it and play. And that was around the time when I first played the first Phoenix Wright game. And I just remember like falling in love with that series and just binging it during the hurricane power outage. And it's funny because if anyone remembers the first Phoenix Wright game on the DS, they added an extra chapter at the end where you're helping Emma and you meet a bunch of new people. One of the people you meet was this like police guy, and he's like a bumbling kind of doof.
Yeah.
And he would scream into this megaphone that would make like this feedback noise.
Oh god, that was bad.
And I'm just playing my DS game happily at home, and the power's out, so you know nobody else was like listening to anything on the TV. And the house would just have that feedback noise constantly. And my mom's like, what is that noise? Good game, man. The original Phoenix Wright is so good. All the Phoenix Wright games on the DS, by the way, are amazing. So definitely play them if you haven't. Like just the whole trilogy and how it all connects together, and like the very satisfying ending.
Didn't
so
you
good.
get upset at one of the games though when they started bringing in too many gimmicks, like the heart lock or something?
I mean, yeah, technically, I would say that the gimmick that they introduced in the second one with the heart lock is like not my favorite. But it's a lot less bad than some of the other gimmicks they keep adding to the series later. So, whatever. I guess you win some, you lose some. But ultimately, like, all those games were really good. Especially, like, the final chapters of each game are just, like, fantastic. But anyway, well, that's Phoenix Wright for you.
So there's not much about the DS after that, huh? Because then they started bringing out, like, oh, the DS Lite and...
Yeah.
The only thing I remember about that is getting the pastel pink one, because Super getting back into Mew. I was like, oh, this looks like Mew, so I'm gonna get it. And then we probably had to sell it at some point.
Yeah, regrettably or not. And like, oh, buy a console and then play it a while and then sell it because we're not playing it, whatever. Yeah, I don't remember too much more worth mentioning. I mean, there's lots of good games. We could talk about games forever, but let's move on to the 3DS, which we did not get for a long time. A lot of people didn't get it at first. I mean, it had a rocky launch.
I mean, I guess I remember having it, but I don't remember the specifics of the rocky launch or what games did or did not come with it.
Yeah, we did not buy it at the beginning because if you did, Nintendo rewarded you with a bunch of Game Boy Advance games. And to this day, I'm pretty sure that's still the only way you could get those Game Boy Advance games on a 3DS because they never like made an emulator for it.
Oh yeah, because it was the DS that had both cartridge ports, and then it was just taken out, I guess, for the 3DS.
So like you could play the DS, your GBA games on the DS, and I did that a lot with like Advance Wars. God, I could go on about Advance Wars.
I think I did that. It must have been your Pokemon Emerald that we had, because I don't think I ever bought Emerald. But I remember playing it and getting Mew on it, and then the cartridge got corrupted somehow. I lost Mew, and that was not a fun time for me.
Yeah, that's a story for another day. That would be a thing to talk about, but I remember that very clearly, actually. Do you want me to tell you why, if you don't remember?
All I remember is I lost Mew, and I don't know, I guess you could call it a little breakdown, and I just went online and bought quite a few like Mew collector's items. Did you like delete it or something? Or no, we tried to mod it?
Okay, so here's the thing. Let's get into it. This was, we were both getting back into Pokemon, and we wanted to play through the remakes of Red and Blue. So it's like Fire Red and
Leaf Green.
Yeah. You had one, I had the other. And we would be like, oh, we can trade. So we like went through the process of like making sure we had all three starters. I would restart, give you a starter, restart, give you a duplicate so that I could have it, etc. Eventually there was a Toys R Us event where they're like, come on by with your GBA and we'll give you Mew.
Oh my god, I had to do it.
So we went to Toys R Us, we both got Mew, and it was cool for a while, right? Then I was really into the whole collecting the Pokemon, but like in Fire Red, you could go to these new islands they added, and it had some of the Pokemon from Pokemon Gold and Silver, but they didn't have all of them there. If you wanted to get all of the Pokemon from that generation, you had to go and play the GameCube game, which was Pokemon Coliseum or something. And that had like a story mode you could play where like you had to like convert the dark Pokemon. And you could get some of the Pokemon that way and then transfer those back and forth from GameCube to your Game Boy Advance. Well, it turns out the games that we bought, the Fire Red and Leaf Green that we bought from eBay, they were...
not legitimate?
Yeah, exactly.
Oof.
So the GameCube game, I guess, knew that, or something happened, and like they would not work with the GameCube. So I was looking it up, like, why is this not working? What is causing these issues? Unfortunately, I didn't realize that. I didn't think to look into like, why is it not working before trying both of our games on it. It's like, why is my game not working on this dumb thing? Maybe Deanna's game will work. So I try your game on it, and it basically bricked your game and like deleted the data, so you lost everything. So yeah, that's why you lost me, is because I was like, why is this GameCube game not working for these games? And I screwed it up. And
oh well, it happens.
Yeah, I remember feeling really guilty about that back then.
But yes, my poor baby Mew.
But now you have Mew in different games, maybe. I don't know.
Not well.
You have it in the card game, I guess.
I mean, I got a couple of the cards. I have the emblem. I don't have the avatar though yet.
That was kind of part of the reason. I remember like when we were playing Cobblemon, I'm like, I'm gonna get Deanna Mew, and I like made sure I did all the work to get a Master Ball. And I'm like, okay, I got the Master Ball. I'm saving it for Mew, and I would go through just jungles and jungles and jungles, and I never found Mew.
I'm sorry, sweetie.
Found like a bunch of other weird legendaries, but never found Mew. Oh,
It's
well.
okay.
It's okay. You stopped playing way before that anyways. But I figured, like, if I found you, I'll get you back on there for at least one day to be like, here you go. And then have, like, at least one night where you're wandering around with me, you happy. But, yeah, it didn't happen.
No, it's okay. It's the thought that counts.
So, yeah.
I guess, actually, after the 3DS, that's basically when the handhelds stopped existing.
Yeah.
Because now it's just the Switch and eventually the Switch 2.
And, like, the Steam Deck, I guess, technically. But,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's no point of that for us, but...
Yeah, because, I mean, even for the Switch, we don't really play it in handheld mode much.
Yeah, it's just we're always home. There's no reason for us to take our games anywhere because we don't go anywhere.
And even if I did take, like, I'd rather just have something on my phone than take a big old Switch if I'm going to, like, play at, like, a doctor's office or something.
Yeah.
But,
so I guess that, unless there's anything else about the 3DS.
No.
I mean, we still
handhelds.
have it. We still have a 3DS. We still have a DS.
The DS is very old, and I don't know if it works very well, but...
The battery is not great. I could probably change it if I cared that much, but I can also just play it while plugged in. So.
And now, like, all the online things are dead. Actually, that was the one thing that was very interesting about the 3DS.
Oh, was that when they had all those, like, Street Pass things?
Okay, yeah, Street Pass was also interesting for the 3DS.
I kind of miss some of those games because there was a plant game and there was like a fighting game, and if you
Like an RPG.
if you beat the other side, you would get their like hundreds of warriors or something.
Yeah, I remember that. That was cool.
I think you played that more, and I was more like, oh, I want to do the plant one, but that didn't last.
Yeah, I remember that because I didn't really like feel much for the plant one. And then there was like the RPG one, I think, where you went like through a haunted house with the characters. Don't remember. There might have been like a space one as well. There was a few. They were like mini games that would tie into the Street Pass thing.
Do you think they would bring that back to the Switch 2 somehow? Because I think
I don't know.
It might have been just in the auto community, but I could have sworn someone brought that up, like, oh, let's bring back Street Pass or something.
It's just like the Switch is so much bigger than the DS, though. Like you could fit that in your pocket, and
well, maybe you could
Street
fit that in your mail pockets, but
the Switch like is not fitting into any of my pockets. It's just they gotten too big, so
maybe the Switch 2, if they do the Street Pass, it'll bring back the fashion of the cargo pants where you could fit like a whole 2-liter.
There's also other types of handhelds too, like retro compilation type handheld things, and I don't really know too much about those, but I know there's like some handhelds you could buy for like $70, $100 that you could just load up with like NES games and stuff. I also would like, for a while I had like this Game Boy emulator on my phone, and I remember like I was playing through Dragon Quest 3 on the Game Boy on my smartphone, and I went to like the dentist's office, and I was like, well, I gotta wait to get called in. I'm just sitting there playing, and I must have been playing like half an hour before I got called up just of Dragon Quest, so that's handy. But like I don't really like playing too many games on like a touch screen, but for an RPG at least.
There's no tactile
feeling to it, but oh well, whatever.
At that point, I'd rather just put it on the DS or 3DS or something.
Yeah. I mean, there's games on the 3DS that, like, I played Monster Hunter on the 3DS, and that's not, like, the most comfortable way of playing Monster Hunter either, so... It's like, why did you guys put it on the fucking handheld? I mean, obviously, because it's popular in Japan, but I'm glad Monster Hunter's back to consoles and PCs now. Anyway, well, we talked about a lot of handhelds. Is there anything else? Any wish list you would wish to see the Switch 2 have? Whether it be features or games?
Probably not, because we barely touched the Switch.
Yeah. I think I don't know if that trailer of the Switch 2, they showed like a Mario Kart. I think that must be a new thing, but...
Yeah, because I think someone said that it shows way more players than is capable on the current Switch.
We don't have Mario Kart on the Switch, so I can't compare like if that's a stage that exists or not, but it looked new to me, so a new Mario Kart would be fun, but I would wish that if they did do a new Mario Kart, it would be in the style of Smash, where it's like characters from every franchise, not just like Super Mario and I guess maybe Link.
Between Mario Kart having all those different characters and also Mario Party.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Because, like, yeah, I'm not into Smash at all. I just don't get into fighting games.
Yeah, exactly. Me too.
It's like, but I would totally play, you know, with Link or Linkle or fucking
Samus.
Pikmin or something.
Yeah, like in a
That'd be
Mario
cool.
Party setting or
Oh,
in a
hell
Mario.
yeah.
Absolutely, they need to do that because like that's probably half the appeal of Smash is just seeing all those characters. But like a lot of us just don't want to play a fighting game. Like, so that would be my dream too. Like, make a new Mario Party, make a new Mario Kart, but do it in the style of Smash where you got characters from all over Nintendo coming into race or party. And then you could like imagine all the mini games you could make with like different
Franchises.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. With those two games, that would be amazing.
That would be like, okay, that's kind of a Switch 2 dream or wish list thing, but I mean it's less I guess the console and more just games in general, but yeah.
Now here's a quick blast from the past for you, because I never played this. Someone had mentioned that it looked like the Switch 2 controllers or Joy-Cons could be used as mice. If that brought back Mario Paint, how would you feel about that?
I don't know. I mean, it's a fun gimmick. I would not pay for a new Mario Paint, but I think they brought back the Mario Paint dog in Mario Maker, so it wouldn't be unheard of to be like, hey, it's your dog friend again.
Maybe they'd add it as like a DLC type of game or something.
Yeah, like I can't imagine paying $60 for Mario Paint these days.
Yeah, but it's been so long, we don't know what would be included with that.
Yeah, but even still, like, it's one of those things that's hard to say. It's really hard to say. It'd be interesting.
I think some of those games that were on Street Pass, if they could do something with those again, that would be nice. Or like what was it, Miitopia or Tomodachi?
They did kind of make there's that new Me RPG that's on the, I think is it on the Switch or is it on the 3DS? I don't remember. But it's like, oh, you know, you make your Mii and they go on this like 4-party adventure. And yeah,
I think bringing the Mii's back, but better graphics, but still similar. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah, it's tough because like they have their such low poly, simple look, and that's kind of the charming bit about them. I
guess, but maybe if we could do like better clothes or something. Because it was just colors. I
think if you look at the Mii game they made, the RPG one, people have gone crazy with like making characters on that, and it's really impressive. So I think they already have the tech for it. It's just a matter if they want to bother or not. I think
that would be kind of cool.
I don't know why they decided to just stop using them. The Mii's were a great idea. I think that's part of the reason the Wii was so popular, because people had fun creating themselves and they didn't have to go super realistic. It's not like when you play like Monster Hunter Wilds and like go crazy on a character creator. It's like a simple little thing. It's like, oh, it kind of looks like me. That's fun. And like whenever you would see them use like Iwata or Reggie's Mii in their presentations, like, oh, it's clearly them and it's fun. It's really good.
I guess that's pretty good for this week.
You did
pretty decently, I think.
Yeah, it was a fun discussion thinking back on all the handhelds that we've got to enjoy over the years, and it's not like handhelds are dead, it's just a different thing nowadays. It's like you either play cell phones or you play a Switch or a Steam Deck, and I don't know. I'm not really a Steam Deck kind of person or even a Switch person where like I need it to be handheld. Like I'm at home, we don't have kids, just play it on the TV on the couch where it's comfy.
Yeah, we've gotten to the point where technology has got small enough that we've basically just merged handheld with console.
And that was the really impressive thing about the Switch. That was like the dream, and they did it.
Maybe handheld mode could be like 1080 at least, though. Because the screen does seem a little bit larger, so I don't think it should be the 720 anymore.
I guess. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if they released the specs on any of that stuff yet. I guess my other big wish list for the Switch would be better performance, but it's hard because like they're never going to be targeting what our PCs or other consoles can do. That's just not what they care about.
That's fair, but I think if they could at least get their games to work correctly. I mean,
yeah.
Remember the whole fiasco over Pokemon? That was not good.
Yeah, and then every developer is going to be different on how they like optimize it or get the games to look, because like sure, Pokemon looks pretty bad, but then you have people making like Xenoblade, and that looks amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's gonna be hit or miss, even when you have a really good console.
Well, we hope this episode brought some of your own memories back of where you started with handhelds and maybe how far you went with those. Maybe you did things that weren't, Nintendo. Maybe you had a PS Vita or something.
Yeah,
we never got into those.
Definitely one of my blind spots. I've never had a Vita or a PSP. They were expensive, and there was games on there I wanted to try, like the Mega Man powered up games. But
yeah, that was the only one I remember that like, oh, I think David would like this.
Yeah.
But outside of that, who knows? So we'll leave you with those memories, and you can continue on with those.
Or maybe you played the Lynx. Do you remember the Lynx?
No.
Or the Wonder Swan.
What the fuck?
Yeah, or the Neo Geo Pocket.
Okay, I've heard of those. Maybe I heard of the Lynx. And there was like probably Motorola tried something or whatever.
Oh my god, there was the N-Gage. Remember the N-Gage?
Oh god, no, but we can look over the commercials.
Safe to say we didn't have one of those. Everyone kind of made fun of it even back then, but there was a little point in time where I'm like, it would be cool to have a phone that played games. And now that's just a thing.
Now it's a given.
Yeah.
So we'll leave you with that, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.
Love you.
Be good to yourselves.
Bye.